It's December, the dome is lit, and Lucas Oil Stadium is about to become the proving ground for a championship collision. Indiana didn't build this season quietly. They built it with leather popping, roots snapping, and a defense that hunts every blade of turf. The Ohio State Buckeyes didn't rebuild. They reloaded with speed that scares clocks, edges that scream off the line, and a receiver room that turns leverage into legend. Kickoff isn't just a game, it's a statement. Communication louder, pursuit faster, decisions sharper. In a dome where every throw tracks clean, every stunt hits quicker, and every snap feels heavier. Tonight, we peel back the film, lean into the matchups, and set the stage for a Big Ten championship weekend that's impossible to ignore. This is Hoosier football's biggest hour, and the dome? It just made the chessboard smaller. It's number 1 Ohio State versus number 2 Indiana. Lock in Hoosier Nation. The Hoosier tailgate starts now.
Raiola. And picked off! Up the sideline! Indiana! Asbury! Walking them down! Woo! IU! America! They got a football team now!
Championship week is here, and the Hoosiers are getting themselves prepared to take on the number 1 team in the country, the Ohio State Buckeyes, in the Big Ten Championship at Lucas Oil this Saturday. A busy, busy week. We got a jam-packed show here for you tonight. We're going to be joined a little bit later by Sinn from the Journal-Gazette to get his viewpoint on this ball game, as well as the Hoosier.com, Zack Browning, who will also give us his insights and thoughts as the Hoosiers get prepared for Saturday's showdown. And we'll take it to talk a little bit about recruiting as well, as the Hoosiers ink 22 on Wednesday to join the family in Bloomington. Hello again, everybody. I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith, and welcome to another edition of the Hoosier Tailgate here on thehoosier.com. We appreciate you being here with us this evening. If you could do me a favor, and if you could hit the like and subscribe button, greatly appreciate that. And then if you enjoy watching or listening, as that is, on Spotify or Apple Podcast, takes about not even a minute to go in there and give us a rating on the show. Maybe add a comment or two. Greatly appreciate that as well. It does help us in the algorithms and such. So we appreciate that in advance. And also you will find tonight, especially in the comment section, some links to the Fanatic store for your pleasure in terms of picking up some potential game gear for this weekend's contest, as well as also a link to our link tree that will also be placed in there at some point in time during this evening. As always, if you would like to participate, ask a question, make a comment, by all means, we want you to be a part of the show. It's because of you. It's what keeps us going here each and every week, and we invite you to do that in the chat box if you can. And outside of that, we got to get ourselves rocking and rolling for tonight because, like I said, this Indiana team is starting to go into a scenario right now where they're going to be playing on the biggest stage of program history. Kurt Cignetti, in his second year, has brought Indiana from the dustbin of loss after loss after loss to a team right now that is going to play for the national, also the Big Ten championship, I should say. And then maybe quest for a national championship, but let's play one of them at a time, and that's what's in front of us is the Big Ten championship. I do hope that we'll have a great crowd on hand in Lucas Oil Stadium, as Indiana also plays basketball that afternoon against the Louisville Cardinals. The Darren DeFries Hoosiers trying to bounce back from a disappointing loss at Minnesota yesterday evening. So they'll be coming in at Gainesville Fieldhouse looking for a victory on Saturday afternoon. And then, of course, Saturday night over in Lucas Oil Stadium, the Big Ten championship. And prior to that, if you can get over to Clayton Anderson's the Country Bar there in Indianapolis, not right kind of cat a corner to the field house there, Jim Coyle and I will be having our pregame as well as basketball postgame for him as well there at Clayton's place there in Indianapolis. We'd love for you to be a part of it. Probably get kicking off and around, probably around that 4 o'clock hour. If you go to the basketball game and you're looking to buy some time in between, come over and be a part of the festivities there as we get ourselves prepared for a quick turnaround, as will Mr. Don Fisher, who's going to call both games this weekend. It's crazy. And in that respect to calling both these games. And yes, John, it's hard to get yourself listening to that idea that Indiana has changed in a matter of a couple of years under Kurt Cignetti to the point where they're going to go up against probably the most talented team within the Big Ten, if not the country, the Ohio State Buckeyes. You've got to call it what it is. They are a tremendous team from A to Z, and Indiana will be up, and that's just the way it is when you get to this level. You're not going to play any soft team. You're going to play the best teams that college football can offer you. And right now, that's the Ohio State Buckeyes. And we'll see what all happens out in between the white lines. But again, Indiana having that opportunity to get to play on the biggest stage is one thing that is taking place this weekend as well. And then, of course, being that it's in Lucas Oil Stadium, a place that everybody is very well aware of. I was there last week for the state championship games. Many kids have played in that arena, some that are even playing for Indiana, some that are even playing for Ohio State, have played in the Lucas Oil Stadium back in their high school days. And that will be the aspects of that in that regard. But again, Ohio State hasn't been to the Big Ten championship since 2021, I believe, was their last chance at the Big Ten championship. And that was, of course, in Lucas Oil. So a lot of these guys that are playing have no recollection of that date in that respect. And Indiana, it's been quite a while for them to be saying that they get to participate for the Big Ten championship on Saturday. 1 versus 2 is a unique setup as well, because Indiana and Ohio State, it's been a long while since we've seen a 1 versus 2 conference championship game. I think the last one may have been in the SEC, like when Georgia, Alabama faced off a few years ago. But for it to happen in the Big Ten, like it is Saturday, that is a very unique scenario. Both teams coming off impressive wins. Ohio State, an impressive win at Ann Arbor against the Michigan Wolverines, a game that they controlled better part of it. And Ryan Day finally breaks the 4-game losing streak to Michigan. And I'm sure they were quite relieved to have done that in the Big House and get that win there. And for Ryan Day, because if you think 365 days ago at this point in time, Ryan Day was actually having to hire security people to take care and guard his family because of the craziness that Ohio State football is. So now, not having to worry about silliness like that, I'm sure he's quite happy that the ending is what it was on Saturday there for his Buckeyes. Indiana, of course, played at Purdue, a night game, very cold evening in West Lafayette, but Indiana's rushing game was too tough to stop for the Boilers. Over 355 yards on the ground. Roman Hemby had his best game of the year, breaking an 83-yard run. And then, of course, the defense did what the defense does, and that was pretty much put a stop to anything Purdue was trying to do on the evening. The other thing tonight is we get going here as well. We talked about the recruiting aspect. Indiana did have their 26 class lined up and signed 22 new incoming first years under Kurt Signetti, a very good class, heavily defensive led class in that respect. So they had a lot of good players in the class. They had 4 stars, I believe. And although that was the very first day that you could sign the letter of intent, it still can go on up through the first of the year. Those are the things that, maybe another kid gets added to the fray. We'll have to wait and see in all this, but we'll have to go and see what all happens. But again, Indiana was able to get a good class lined up for this week in that respect, in terms of getting guys in the hopper for this 2026 class. And they're working on the 27 class and 28 class as well. We'll see. They lost some guys, of course, decommitted. And I think they ended, I don't know where their ranking is, because those things are ever changing with the number of people that either come and go. So that's something to get over to the Hoosier.com. They had a lot of great recruiting day coverage, still do. You can go over there and pick up your subscription for the year and get all that. There's also a link for me in terms of breaking down each and every one of the signees. So 22 of them. There's a playlist on my YouTube page that will allow you just to go right down through there as quickly as you want to. Now, the other thing on this equation is, remember that the portal is only open one time this year. That is in the month of January. So the recruiting staff for Indiana is going to have to be doing double duty when it comes to the portal. And when you think about it, Indiana has had great success with the portal, especially that spring portal. That's where they did their damage. And unfortunately for Indiana, that is no longer a part of the equation, as there will only be one portal. Michael, appreciate you being a part of the show again tonight. Appreciate you coming in. Hope you stay nice and warm, as it's a little chilly out there in the state of Indiana. But that was one thing with Indiana. They were able to do quite well with the portal in that spring period, but only one time of being open. And there's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen between now and, let's say, the next recruiting cycle, because right now this whole thing is a mess. I mean, it's literally a mess on what has to be taken care of when it comes to recruiting, how it's changed now that you're into the rev share and NIL, and you've got everything is just kind of a mess, in the sense of an early signing period in today's world doesn't mean much. I mean, quite honestly, what most people should try to do, or I think the NCAA should try to do, as well as some other coaches that have voiced this same opinion, is the way to get things under control is to finish the season no later than January 2nd. So your national championship is crowned on the 2nd or 3rd. To do that, you got to move the season up by a couple weeks. Instead of having that week 0 that we've seen in years past, that would be actually week 1, which is somewhere around the 20th of August in that time period. But if you did it, moved it up there, you could probably get everything completed and through with this, and completed where when the portal opened in January, and from a recruiting standpoint, to be able to sign your class of first years in January everybody would be on the equal playing ground. And you wouldn't have to worry about this dynamic where you've got teams that are still playing, that are trying to, work the portal and vice versa. And it would be much simpler if they could get themselves on a even keel with this dynamic of the season, the playoffs, and then how the portal is and how signing day is. Because right now it's just kind of scattered through the universe, so to speak, and it does not align with the way college football has gone in the last couple of years. When they first initiated an early signing date, the reason why that was done, and this was something that was involved in my day back at in Ball State, they wanted that early signing period so they could see what was still available or what they needed to pick up. And that's when the Mid-American Conference or G5 schools would clean up, because the big boys would, no doubt forget about somebody or not offer somebody. And that's where a really good player would end up at the G5 and level. And these people were wanting that aspect of it. So it's a mess. It's going to be a mess until we get it all situated in that respect. So we'll find out what all happens there. But do want to get off to our first guest here this evening, and that is Zack Browning from the Hoosier.com. I'm going to try to get him all pulled in here now and see if we can get that added to the equation. And there he is. Zack, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I got you. You got me, Coach?
I do have you. I do have you very well. Let's see if we have any echoes and things of that nature. Get your volume kicked up. And if anybody hears an echo, I'm sure they'll let me know, but I think we should be okay. How you doing, my man? I know busy time over here the last couple nights with the recruiting and everything else that's going on in the world around Indiana and Bloomington. It's been quite busy. And I guess before we really get started into what's occurring Saturday, let's take a step back. Let's talk about this recruiting class. Indiana pulled in 22 signees, and really no surprises. They really locked everybody up that they thought they would get. Now, they did lose some guys that decommitted and so forth and so on. But your overall impressions of this recruiting class that Coach Signetti and staff put together on Wednesday?
Yeah, first off, I just wish all national signing days were this easy for everyone around the country. It was pretty cut and dry for Indiana. Everybody that was expected to sign did sign pretty much within the first 2-3 hours of signing day. So it was a pretty easy signing day for Indiana. But the biggest thing, and we've talked about it a lot, that jumps out to me about this class is the defensive emphasis. And I think that kind of aligns with what Kirk Signetti likes to do and how he wants to build his roster. He's already shown in the past couple of seasons that he has no issue building an offense through the transfer portal with guys like Elijah Surratt, with Omar Cooper, who is already here, but guys like, last year's receiving core with Miles Cross and Miles Price and Tyler Morris, who didn't play this year out of Michigan. And then obviously with the quarterbacks and at the running back spot too, Kirk Signetti has no issue building pretty much an entirely new offense around that offensive line via the transfer portal. Defensively, though, there's been a lot of holdovers from James Madison, a lot of holdovers from the old Indiana, like a guy like Isaiah Jones. So those guys have been brought up through the program by Bryant Haynes, by Buda Williams and Pat Coons and all the position coaches on the defense. So when you look at Indiana, when you look at those top 4 ranked recruits, the 4-star guys for Indiana, the Gabe Hill, the Henry Olinger, Cavante Hugan, Cameron McCaney, all 4 of those guys are defensive guys, with 3 of those guys being guys on the defensive line. So there's a clear emphasis to really build the foundation of the future of Indiana's defense this year in this 2026 class.
Yeah, and that's understandable. They're going to probably take the biggest hit with graduation and such with that. And of course, trying to build that foundation up. Indiana did have 4 signees that were ranked a 4-star in this class. And, for me, I thought it was a solid class. I think the flip of Novak, the big offensive lineman out of Andran, who I saw play in the semi-state or the state finals last week, that was a huge get, in my opinion. And in some respects, kind of the in-state pick for me in terms of Indiana picking up. We've seen too many times those guys go outside of Indiana to play somewhere else that are really good. I believe it's Caden Curry, the kid that's at Ohio State that Indiana faced this weekend, is a Center Grove kid. And so these are the type of guys that Indiana has to continue to pound and recruit and keep them at home as much as humanly possible. It's not always going to be that easy, of course, and when we talk about that aspect of things. But Indiana, I thought, did a really good job in that respect from that standpoint. Let's talk about the game here coming up, Zach. I know that everything is geared towards that. You know, we both were at Purdue, and it was kind of one of those things where hurry up and win so we can get out of here. That would be the key point of this. But when you look at this game on Saturday, what impresses you the most about these Ohio State Buckeyes?
It's just the utter dominance. It was kind of what Indiana did last year. Indiana blew everybody out. They didn't play really any close games. Ohio State has pretty much done that against every single team they played. They had that one-score game to open the year against Texas, but that's week one, so you're not going to put a ton of stock into that at this point heading into the championship weekend. But it's just the sheer dominance of this team, and there's not really any weaknesses. That's really what stands out the most. You look offensively, the offensive line is good. Maybe that's the one area of vulnerability with their pass protection. It's been good, but not elite, as everything else is for the Buckeyes. Maybe running backs as well. Bo Jackson, the true freshman, has come on as of late and played really well, but maybe there's less talent than normal in the running back room for Ohio State. But then you've got a true freshman quarterback who is awesome. One of the best two quarterbacks in the country. We'll probably see the best two quarterbacks in the country on Saturday. The receiver room speaks for itself. It's one of the best receiver rooms I've ever seen, and I think most people have seen, with a collection of talent in there, with tight end Max Clare, the Purdue transfer, included in those elite pass catchers. Then defensively, it's an Ohio State defense. I mean, what are you going to say? There's 4 and 5 star guys, 2, 3 deep along the defensive line. You've got probably the number 1 pick in the NFL draft next year, an Arvell Reese at linebacker. You've got Caleb Downs, who is arguably the best player in all of college football, regardless of position, in the secondary. There's no shortage of talent. There's no shortage of elite players, not even just in the first lineup, not even in the first 11, but 2 deep, 3 deep at some positions. But it's just the sheer dominance and the depth of this team. It's always going to wow you when you look at Ohio State.
Yeah, very good defense. We'll dive into some statistics later as we get along in the show, but you're going to find that these two teams are as equally matched in terms of the black and white of it I've ever seen. It's kind of unbelievable when you sit down and look at this from the black and white statistics of a 12-game season to see where these guys are both identical in a lot of categories, which kind of took me back a little bit in that respect. When you look at this Ohio State defense, you talked about Caleb Downs. Do you feel like it's a defense that is even more complex than what they showed a year ago under Jim Knowles and things like that? Or do you think maybe that it's been simplified to take advantage more of the athleticism that they have on the field? Because last year, Jim Knowles was a technician in terms of schemer and did a lot of different stuff. It seems like maybe Patricia's added an element where he wants to get the kids playing fast, and to do that, you can't be over the complicated. How have you seen that with their defense?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Maybe even the answer to your question is yes. They've done a little bit of both. Some simplification, some complication in other places, because Patricia's kind of brought that NFL mindset where, we've got the best athletes on the planet. That's what Ohio State has, some of the best athletes in all of college football. And he's pretty much just gone and said, hey, go out there and show why you're the best athletes. Let the players kind of make the decisions. Let the players kind of be themselves and show why they're going to be playing on Sundays in a few years. But there's still some of the complications, the complexities of the disguising coverages, the stunts, the wraps, the defensive line movement and stuff like that, where Indiana hasn't necessarily seen a defense that's maybe as well versed in that as the Buckeyes are this year. But again, it comes back to that's just letting the players be themselves. They're so talented, they're so knowledgeable, they're so great up and down at all three levels of the defense, where Patricia hasn't really had to do much overcomplication of things because he's got guys that know the game of football. They are going to be playing on Sundays next year or in the next couple of years. And he's got guys that can go out and make plays that normal human beings and normal 18 to 23-year-olds simply can't make. So it makes him look a little bit better as a defensive coordinator as well, putting those guys in the right spots to succeed.
What do you think of Indiana's chance, I guess I should say, in terms of being able to run the football? That was the thing a year ago going up against Ohio State, that they just did not have the firepower in the front lines to really do much in the run game. Indiana's coming off another stellar performance, 350 some odd yards against Purdue. They had struggled against other teams up to that point. Is Indiana capable of running the ball on this Ohio State defense? Because they're right behind Indiana in run defense. When you look at it, how does that play into this ball game, even for both sides? Because running the ball has got to be somewhere in the equation.
I would definitely say if I had to line them both up, I'd say Indiana probably has the better rushing attack, just combined with the offensive line. It's interesting because Indiana against Oregon, against Iowa, against Penn State, it wasn't a ton of consistent success on the ground. It wasn't Indiana's 300-plus yard rushing performances. It wasn't the 8 yards per carry that we've seen Indiana tally against some of the other opponents in the Big Ten on the schedule this year. But they got big chunks when they needed to, if that makes sense. Against Oregon, it wasn't, Indiana averaging 5 or 6 yards per carry, but there was a Roman Hemby 12-yard run here, a Kalon Black big pickup on third down there. Iowa, maybe less of that. Indiana got stuffed on a couple of fourth and shorts on the ground game against Iowa. Penn State kind of similar. So we'll see what type of running game Indiana is able to have, because it doesn't have to be let's pound it down their throats and pick up 5 yards per carry every single time Roman Hemby or Kalon Black touches the ball. It's got to be a 3rd and 2, can you pick up 2 yards on the ground? It's got to be a 1st and 10, can you pick up 4 or 5 yards and stay ahead of the chains? It doesn't have to be every single time a running back touches it, they have success. But more often than not, Indiana's got to be able to pick up yards because they have to be able to open up that RPO game. And I think for Indiana, which is potentially an advantage they have over Ohio State in this game, is Indiana does have that factor of the QB run element that Ohio State just doesn't have. Julian's saying, to no fault of his own, he hasn't been put in those situations to really need to scramble or need to pick up yards with his legs because he hasn't been pressured this year, but he hasn't really done much with his legs this season, saying the true freshman. So with Indiana, with Fernando Mendoza, maybe there's an added element. Maybe he gets thrown into those option plays a little bit more, and maybe he's asked or told by Coach Signetti and Shanahan and Chandler Whitmer to maybe pull the ball and run with it, use his legs himself a little bit more frequently on Saturday, just to kind of give a different element to that Ohio State rush defense and that front seven. But I think Indiana, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be good enough. Same goes with Ohio State. It doesn't have to be 4 or 5 yards per carry every single carry. You just got to be able to run the ball when it matters most.
Talking with Zack Browning here from the Hoosier.com. Indiana, Ohio State Saturday in Lucas Oil for the Big Ten Championship. Yeah, I do think what you had outlined there, Zach, is pretty much on point in terms of what in the game like this, when you're facing two talented defenses, you got to take what they give you, and whatever that is, you got to have a positive come out of it. When you look at this Indiana defense, what do you think they're going to have to do to this Julian Sinn in terms of what he's done? Here's a kid that's completed somewhere in the neighborhood of 78% of his passes on the year. He's got 2 big studs on the outside, Tate and Jeremiah Smith, both as, equally as good as the other when you really sit down and talk about it. Now they're going to face a team that's got a tight end threat into the equation, which is not something that Indiana has had to face this year to the extent that they will on Saturday. But what is this Indiana defense have to do to contain, disrupt this Ohio State defense?
It's got to be havoc. You've got to create havoc. You've got to force Julian Sane into uncomfortable situations because he really hasn't this season. As good as he's been, as good as Ohio State has been, you can't really point to any specific adversity the Buckeyes and Sane have faced this year. Maybe going down early on the road in the big house against Michigan, but they really dominated that game for 3+ quarters. So there's not much adversity you can point to and say Julian Sane overcame that adversity. He didn't throw a pick six on the road against Oregon and then lead a 75-yard game-winning drive. He didn't do what Fernando Mendoza did against Iowa or against Penn State. So if you can make Sane uncomfortable and put a true freshman into a situation where he's not been so far throughout his collegiate career, then I think Indiana could potentially have some success. That's what we saw against Oregon. Dante Moore is as special of a quarterback as there is in college football. He is projected either next year or this year to be one of the first quarterbacks taken in the draft when his time comes. But they made him uncomfortable, and that was really the first time. It was an earlier game of the season, but it was really one of the first times all year that Dante Moore had been uncomfortable. He had been sacked prior to that game against Indiana, and Indiana not only was able to put pressure on him, but also bring him down for sacks that made him uncomfortable. He was forced into mistakes. He turned the ball over, and we saw Julian saying he's capable of turning it over. He's not perfect. Nobody is. He turned it over early against Michigan. So if you can force him into uncomfortable situations and force him into mistakes, and then you have to capitalize on those mistakes, obviously, but it's not even just getting a sack on every play. Mikhail Kamara, he leads the Big Ten in pressures. I know Indiana would take 4 or 5 pressures out of Kamara on Saturday, just trying to force Sane into a situation where he hasn't been. He loves to kind of go through his first 2 or 3 reads because he's got that kind of time. But if you can force him into get to his first read, and then by the time he's looking for a second read, then you're getting to him. That's maybe all you need if you're Indiana. And I think the secondary also kind of plays hand in hand with that. If you're D'Angelo Pons, if you're Jamari Sharp, if you're the safeties, if you can buy this pass rush, if you can buy the Landinos, the Tuckers, the Dailies, the Kamaras of the world, an extra half a second by guarding and staying tight with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate for an extra half a second, and that allows a guy like Kamara to get home, that's pivotal in a game like this, in a game of inches that will come down to the wire, I expect. So you got to be able to find ways to make Julian Sane uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think, the best team that probably played Ohio State, at least for a half, would have to be Penn State. They were down 17-14 at halftime at Ohio State. This was the week before Indiana played Penn State. And that crew was rejuvenated with the change and things that galvanized by Franklin's firing and Terry Smith's promotion and all that. But I guess that would, in my mind, have to be the best first half that anybody's played against this team, because they were only down 3 points. Now, second half was a different story, and Ohio State ends up pulling away. So you got to take, what the little wins that you can in that respect. Looking at this game, going into a dome environment, first time for Indiana, first time for Ohio State being in a dome, as a team. This team, the last time Ohio State was there was 21, and these guys, there's probably not any of these guys on this team that were familiar with it. We hear some of the things about a dome stadium. What's your feeling on this being even though it's a neutral site, but now you're in a dome environment, and how that all plays into this game when it comes to hydration, as it comes to 75,000 people kind of breathing on top of you and things of that nature? How do you think that plays into this game, the atmosphere of this ball game Saturday, even for both teams?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it in some way kind of levels the playing field, because we all saw it, whether he's going to admit it. Kirsten did kind of admit it a little bit. Mendoza struggled with the cold. It was the coldest game in Ross-Ade Stadium history against Purdue. And Mendoza, whether he wants to admit it or not, he struggled. And whether that was just him not getting into a rhythm, whether that was actually the cold and the freezing temperatures, he struggled outdoors in December. You're not meant to play football outdoors in December consistently at the college level. So I think the fact that it's indoors, there will be no excuses. There will be no oh, Mendoza can't handle the cold. He's a Miami kid that played at Cal. There's no excuses there. There will be no in the kicking game. Nicholas Radicic, he's not missed a kick
Mm-hmm.
all season long. There's no excuse there. So I think it kind of levels the playing field. And I think also what it does is the lights are bright. You're in a
Mm-hmm.
dome. It's where the Colts play. You'll see NFL, Super Bowl banners. You'll see AFC Championship banners. You'll see in that Ring of Honor some of the names of the greatest football players to ever play. Peyton Manning's name will be on there for those two quarterbacks. So I think it's whichever team can kind of handle that stage. They can look at it pregame, go out for the pregame warm-ups, maybe take in the moment and say, wow, this is a special moment. We're happy to be here. We're thankful to be here. But it's whatever moment and whatever team can kind of flush that out and really just pretend and imagine as if they're playing in their 7th or 8th grade turf, or not even turf field or grass field in middle school or early high school. Whichever team can go back to those days, because the lights are going to be bright. It's a big time stadium. I guess Ohio State's played plenty of games and stadiums that fit the capacity of Lucas Oil, but Indiana hasn't played many games in 100,000 plus capacity stadiums. So I think whichever team can kind of flush that and really kind of not make the moment bigger than it is, even though it is obviously a big moment, but look to seize that moment and not succumb to that moment, I think that team will have the advantage.
Well, they say playing inside, you have to have hydration, and it's not something that you can just start the week of. So, whoever is taking care of their bodies and making sure they're drinking a lot of liquids over the last couple of weeks is going to benefit you, because that atmosphere in dome stadiums can really dehydrate you really fast. And that's going to be an element to keep an eye on in this ball game for both sides when it comes down to it. Zach, I appreciate you coming on this evening. And if you get over to the Hoosier.com, Zach's got a lot of different things there about the game, as well as recruiting for Indiana and others. The day-to-day coverage of Indiana athletics is on par, as well as this past week's recruiting class, a lot of different things there. But get over to the Hoosier.com and pick up that subscription today and get everything that Zach puts on the table in terms of what he'll bring to the Hoosier.com and his analysis and stuff. Zach, appreciate you coming on, buddy. We'll see you down there Saturday at the Dome.
Thanks for having me, Coach.
We'll see you, partner. Zack Browning from the Hoosier.com here on the Hoosier Tailgate, as well as those that are listening to us through the 1380 The Fan 100.9 FM. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have Dylan Sinn join us from the Journal-Gazette, all right here on Hoosier Tailgate on the Hoosier.com and 1380 The Fan 100.9 FM.
Huddle football fans, tailgate season is here and nobody gets. You ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors? Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find everything you need, from grills to jerseys and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike and Under Armour, all at unbeatable prices every day. With 8 Academy stores across Indiana, including our Bloomington location, fun can't lose, and neither can you. Gear up today at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code on3, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. 1. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code on3. 2. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. 3. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code on3 when you sign up. Make this college football season 1 for the history books. Make it legendary. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code on3 and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER, available in the U.S. Call 877.
Welcome back here to the Hoosier Tailgate here on the Hoosier.com, as well as 1380 The Fan 100.9 FM. Joining me now is Mr. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. was able to get on here and join us tonight. Dylan, appreciate you jumping on. How you feeling, my man?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. As always, I'm feeling really good.
Feeling good. Well, we saw Indiana on Wednesday ink 22 first-year players, with 4 of those being 4-stars. Before we kind of dive into this game Saturday, get your take on Indiana's recruiting efforts this year for Coach Cignetti and his staff.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a step up from the last couple of years, right? Like I think this class was ranked in the high 20s, low 30s, which the previous 2 have been ranked in the low 40s. So it's a step up. There's still more steps that need to be taken because they've hit on so many guys in the transfer portal the last couple of years, and you're just not going to be able to do that year over year. You need to make high school recruiting the backbone of what you do, and they need to, and they'll get there. I do think they will, but they need to continue to step up the efforts there. They're working on it. I think the 27 class will be even better, but that they will have to take another large group of players from the transfer portal this offseason, I would think, especially with a class that only has 22. That's on the smaller side for high school recruiting. Not extremely small or anything like that, but on the smaller side. And so you'll have to take a fair amount from the portal to replenish this roster and get ready for next season.
Yeah, I think you're correct in this aspect of things. What will be interesting is that there's only one recruiting portal this year. There's only one. That's in January. And Indiana hopefully continues to get the bye after this weekend, depending on what happens. They're going to have to be doing double duty because they're potentially playing in a New Year's bowl game, and the recruiting staff for Indiana is going to be quite busy. And if you remember correctly, Indiana's success in the portal was usually in the spring is when they really got some of their top guys. And so now that's not there for them. And so now they're going to have to, do it as all at once there in the month of January. But yeah, I look for them to have to take I think they'll take some defensive guys, of course, but some wide receivers are going to have to be a point of emphasis, as you're going to lose some guys there. And it's going to be interesting to see the running back room and all that, how it looks. But let's get into this game on Saturday there at Lucas Oil Stadium, Indiana, Ohio State. And I was talking earlier to Zack Browning from thehoosier.com. When I looked at these statistics of these two teams, it is crazy how close these two ball clubs are in terms of offense and defense. Defensively, they're 1-2 in a lot of different statistical categories that carry over to the national spotlight as well. But when you look at Ohio State, kind of what do you see them at? What's their core identity, do you think? I mean, is this a team that is the tradition, Ryan Day, offensive guru type of ball club that's kind of what his mantra is and has been? Kelly was there a year ago, or has it kind of shifted a little bit away from that and more to a defensive emphasis in their identity as a team?
Yeah, they've definitely shifted toward defense. I think the defense is the stronger of their 2 units this year, actually by a pretty wide margin, because they have the best defense in the country. IU's is close, Oklahoma's is close, but Ohio State's is the best defense in the country statistically. And so that is kind of their identity this year. I do think that they've done a good job really building up that unit over the last couple of years. And then Matt Patricia, coming from the NFL, has done a really good job with that unit this season, putting it in good spots. But the thing with Ohio State this year is their identity is basically they're going to stay in second or third gear until they really need to turn it on, right? They've spent this entire season aiming for the playoff. They went to the national championship and won it last year, and they were like, that was a very long season. We were exhausted at the end. In order to get back there and do it again, we're going to have to pace ourselves. And so they've spent the entire season basically trying to make games as short as possible, run the ball, stop the run, just limit possessions, and assume they're going to win because they just have way more talent than everybody else. And they've done that this year. Their games have been very quick. There's not that many possessions, and we'll see what happens. And the thing is, they haven't played anyone with Indiana's ability yet. But I'm sure they will probably try to do the same thing again because they feel they have at least 3 more games here that they want to get through, and they want to feel good about going into that game. So their identity this year has really been that, where it's a supercar that doesn't get out of second gear.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens when they have to get out of second gear, if Indiana can force them to do that, and what happens when they do.
Yeah, I was reading where they really did a study this last off season about surviving and, going on these deep runs. What is it you needed to do in order to preserve bodies and limit hits and things like that? And really, essentially what they've done is they've built in, by the number of plays that their guys have played in, intentionally, an extra buy game in terms of number of plays available. So when you look at it from that perspective, he's either going to be looked at as this smart and everybody's going to want to do what he did, or like you said, because they haven't been in the trenches of warfare, 4 quarters, need this or need that, is that going to hinder them in a game, whether it's this weekend or some other time? What's your thoughts on that aspect of it? Because they haven't had to have that drive that Indiana's put up twice, once at Oregon and once at Penn State, and things of that nature.
Yeah, I do think that's an advantage for Indiana if the game is close in the fourth quarter, right? Now, you have to get there. You have to play 3 good quarters to give yourself that opportunity, right? And I do think Ohio State's probably going to be fresher in this game because of what you just said, because of what they've done all year, where not only have they limited snaps for their in the game, but they have also rotated guys through. And that's why Ohio State recruiting as well as it does and getting all these 5-star kids is a huge benefit for them, because they can rotate in a guy, a second or third stringer who's 98% as good as the starter, and not have much drop off because they've recruited so well. And they've done that all year. They play a ton of guys. And that's part of the reason they haven't blown teams out quite as much. They win a lot of games by between 21 and 28 points because they don't really care about style points. They have not cared about style points the entire year. And so we'll see. Can Indiana play 3 good quarters and get them into the fourth quarter where they're not as experienced in a close game? Maybe. But it's going to take 3 really good quarters from Indiana to make that advantage work.
Yeah, I guess, what is it you think this Indiana offense has to do for them to win Saturday? What is it, if you looked at it, what do you think they're going to have to do to beat Ohio State?
Yeah, I think it's going to be protect Fernando Mendoza, right? Like, that was where they fell apart last year against Ohio State, was they just were not able to protect Curtis Rourke. Now, part of that was it was on the road in Columbus. They couldn't hear the cadence very well. They had struggled putting in a silent count. That was a big part of it. The other part of it was that Drew Evans was hurt. It was a big loss along that offensive line. He probably will be back this week, it seems like. He dressed out and warmed up against Purdue. And then, obviously, part of it was Curtis Rourke. Was not very mobile last year because he was playing on a torn ACL. So you think maybe each of those 3 things will be a little bit different this year, and you feel a little bit better about the opportunity they have to protect Fernando Mendoza. But if he's sacked 4 or 5 times in this game, I'm going to find it really hard because you're going to be behind the chains. You're not going to convert 3rd and long against these guys. And so you're going to need to stay ahead of the chains, and that involves Mendoza staying upright, making good reads, making smart plays, and keeping IU in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, 3rd and manageable, where you can convert. Otherwise, it's going to be a really long day for this offense.
Yeah, I do agree there too, Dylan. I appreciate you coming on. I know it's a little shorter than I'd like it, but 1380 decided to put us on, so I got to keep it in the boundaries of that hour show. So we got to do what the boss says to do. But appreciate you coming on. We'll see you down there Saturday at the Dome for Indiana, Ohio State. Have a great, safe travel down there. We'll catch you down there.
Absolutely, Griff. Thanks for having me on, as always.
All right, partner. Dylan Sinn from the Journal-Gazette joining us there from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, I should say, here on the Hoosier Tailgate and 1380 The Fan 100.9 FM. Moving right along as we get into this tonight, wanted to first talk about some of these things here that I was talking about, stat comparisons. And when you start looking at this game, the black and white of it, you're going to see that these 2 teams are as equally as matched as teams that you can see in anything that you can point out with a lot of things with them. When you look at the Ohio State and Indiana offense, look at the close on this aspect. The difference, being that Indiana has a clear advantage in the rushing offense aspect. And then passing, look how close that is. Total offense. This was what was amazing to me was third down conversions. Both offenses are converting 57% of their third down conversions. That is nuts that you see two offenses in the same aspect of third down. A big difference here is fourth down conversions. We know Indiana has not been as good this year in this category, where Ohio State is almost near 70% in it. Something to watch on Saturday, especially if you start getting into games where Ohio State maybe starts thinking of going it on fourth down because of that, in that respect. Red zone scores. This is where you either get a touchdown or a field goal. Again, 92%, 90%. Both teams have had 61 opportunities to 62 opportunities. I couldn't make this up if I had to. I mean, that's is how close it is in this respect. And then when you look at the red zone touchdowns, Indiana has a little bit better spread there, 75% to 64%, but not by much in that respect. The biggest differential that I've seen, Indiana leads the nation in turnover margin at +8, where Ohio State, I believe, is only a +4. And this is where you get the points off of turnovers. 103 points off of turnovers for Indiana is astounding. And then when you look at the points off of turnovers for Ohio State, only 45, and that's quite low. But when you only come out as a +4 on all this, you can see why. And then time of possession, almost identical. 33-40 for Indiana, 33-54 for Ohio State. So two offenses, two really good quarterbacks, and almost stat for stat are identical in a lot of the categories. Switching over to defense, where these two, again, are very similar. Indiana, 10.9 in scoring defense to 7.8 for Ohio State. Rush defense, Indiana leads in that category. Pass defense, Ohio State leads in that with 121 to 172 for Indiana. And then total defense, Ohio State has a 48-yard advantage in total defense. Third down conversions, just as much as the offense was similar. Look at this. Third down conversions for the defenses, 28% for both of these clubs. They are keeping an opposing offense, converting third down chances to only 28%, which tells you a lot of offenses have been in long yardage situations against both. And then fourth down conversions. This is where Indiana struggled a little bit. They're giving up almost 60% on fourth down. Ohio State, 35. So like I said, that is a down to keep an eye on Saturday. Red zone, about equal when it comes to some of these things here. And touchdowns as well. Indiana, both teams over 30 sacks, 34 for Indiana, 30 for Ohio State. And then there's the turnover margin. Indiana +18 to +4 for Ohio State. And that is kind of one of those things that just interesting dynamic with this ball game on Saturday is that in a lot of ways. If you need the list for the recruiting as far as who all signed, head over to On3. We got a full listing of the guys with their ratings now. Indiana, right about 31 in the country and 8th in the Big Ten with this class. But you can get all of that over there at thehoosier.com. A great class of young men that are coming in. And I do believe Indiana did a great job there in securing some great ball players. When you talk about objectives in tonight's ball game or this game on Saturday, and let me get to that thing because I'm screwing this up already. But Indiana and what they need to do on Saturday is going to be important for them to really understand that when they get a chance to put themselves in a position on Saturday to be in a better position as a team, they're really going to have to stay on schedule against Ohio State. It's going to be imperative for Indiana to stay on schedule and get themselves in a position where they're not fighting this Ohio State defense in that respect. Target, they got to get at least 3 big plays. Again, this is going to help in the run game and open up the pass game. Surratt, Cooper, E.J. Williams, all those guys have to be vitally important in the passing game and targets for them to go up and make big plays. And again, to do that, you got to have great protection. I look at it this way. If Indiana can run 175 yards, that's going to be a tall task on the ground, and 250 yards in the air. They're going to have a chance on Saturday to win. And if their efficiency in the red zone is around that 95%, getting points, it's also going to go a long way for them in terms of getting a victory against the Buckeyes. When you look at defense in that respect, you got to get this offense off schedule. Pressure them on first downs. We talked about that tonight. Even Dylan and Zach talked about how can you disrupt Julian Sinn, a young quarterback, and get him off schedule. Then when you get off the field on the money down situations for Indiana, that's another one that has to be there and quite good for Indiana. Try to get at least 2 takeaways. Do not give Tate and Smith any cheap plays down the field. They're good enough. Make them earn it. Make them earn their catches. And when they do catch it, put a body on them. Put a body on them so that they know coming downfield they're going to pay a price by catching the ball. And then the last one there is get pressure on Sinn. You cannot let this kid have time to sit back there and pick you apart because he will do it. And he's that good of doing it. And then, of course, in special teams, you want to win the field position battle. You got to score or set up a score. When these two teams are this tight in terms of who could win this game, special teams could become that vital aspect of the ball game that determines on who wins or who loses. And for Indiana, don't give up the big play. Remember last year, Indiana gave up the big punt return. Caleb Downs, like 70 some odd yards in that ball game at Ohio State last year that kind of split that game up, because that was the time where Indiana, one, had the bad snap, and then Caleb Downs' punt return. And that changed the whole complexity of that ball game. Indiana should have gone at halftime 7-7. Because of those debacles on special teams, it took them right out of the game. Took them completely out of the game. It had nothing to do with offense or defense. But the special teams, punting and keeping Indiana inside their 20-yard line for like 3 or 4 possessions was huge in that game. The other thing to point out that Indiana has been really good at this year, 10 out of 12 games this season, Indiana has put points on the board prior to half. That is huge. If they can continue to do that on Saturday, if the opportunity presents itself, along with getting points off of turnovers, I like their chances, because this is a game that turnovers are going to make a difference at the end of it, as is special teams in that respect. Guys, I appreciate you coming in and watching the Hoosier Tailgate tonight. And those that are joining us on 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM in Fort Wayne as well. We'll see you down at the game on Saturday. Make sure you stop by Clayton's Country Bar before the game to get a pregame show around 4 o'clock. Me and Jim Coy will be there. And of course, we'll have everything situated afterwards as well with a postgame show at a time to be determined. And then on Monday, 7:30, back here to recap Indiana, Ohio State, Big Ten championship game 1 versus 2 on Saturday, as well as look ahead to the college football playoffs on Monday. But for now, I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. This has been a special Hoosier Tailgate here on thehoosier.com and 1380 The Fan. Good night, everybody.
Yeah.